Hello, I'm Brad.
And I'm Jason.
You are listening to
Dice in Mind.
So we have reached the fifth of our first 5 interviews, and all of them have been fascinating.
Yeah.
From Chris to Kelly to Malcolm. I'm going to forget everybody. And Michael.
Mm.
We've been very lucky to get some very creative people who are influential in this RPG world to actually sit down and talk with us, not only about RPGs, but about their history, about life, about, topics that are tough topics these days, like diversity, equity, equality, inclusion. So tonight, we are capping it. For those that are familiar, there's a show out there called Star Trek Prodigy.
May have heard of it.
Hopefully, if you have heard of it, you have watched it.
I see what you're doing there.
If you have watched it, then you have heard of or heard the work of our next guest.
Yeah. Where are you going with that, Brad?
Yeah. So I was trying to make a pun and it just went completely sideways on me. And that was my attempt at humor, which
I enjoyed it.
Okay.
I enjoyed it, but I'm sure none of our 4 children between us would.
Yeah.
So before we reveal what may already be obvious, a proviso for our listeners and a little chit chat for us, right? Because come for the banter, stay for the interview.
Mm-hmm.
So just so everybody knows who's out there, we don't mean to make this actually a Star Trek podcast. So rest assured, rest assured that Brad will always be here to rein in my penchant for Trek. And it really is just a fluke that we had the great good fortune of chatting with Kelly and then Chris and then tonight's guest. This is a fluke. This was not intentional. Yeah.
I think we've tried to make that clear even out on Twitter, which is where we reside when we're not online.
Right.
We've had the good fortune of talking to folks at Modifius and folks that have been involved in Star Trek role playing.
Yep.
You're going to hear us move into other topics.
Oh yeah.
In
D&D,
our next group.
Yeah.
So we are not,
no.
We talk with folks at Green Ronin and other companies. Yep. We are not, we get nothing in return from companies.
No.
It is purely our own fascination.
Yep.
And in all honesty, giddiness at times that we get to talk about topics that we love and topics that are central to today.
And with the people who are doing the work, right? The creatives, right? Who help us by spending time with us in these interviews to reflect on RPGs and real life through their respective lenses. As a bunch of dads and professionals and middle-agers, if that's a word. So yeah, that's right there. Now, that said, we do have some Star Trek related interviews coming up in the future, and then so much more. Man, wait until you see the diversity of projects, the creatives in our next round of 5 have. But before we go there, this episode. So, Brad, you and I have often talked about music in our favorite canons. We talk music all the time, right?
We talk music all the time because we both, I studied it for a period in college thinking I was going to be a professional.
Mm-hmm.
I chose a different path.
Mm-hmm.
You and I both study instruments now that are different than what we've touched before. You were more on the vocal end. I was more on the classical instrumental end. So music is still a topic of conversation. Not only that, you and I have talked for eons about, and we always have done our top 3. We'll periodically remind ourselves what our top 3 soundtracks are.
Right.
So tonight's episode
is about that, because I gotta say my genre relevant list is changing. So if you can't argue like with John Williams, right, in Star Wars and so many other things. And I can't tell you how many times in the past 30 years, ouch, I've listened to the Jurassic Park soundtrack. Talk about a durable, beautiful soundtrack. But when it comes to Trek, I think you and I tend to line up fairly closely. For me, as full soundtracks, not specific pieces, right? There are 3 pieces from Wrath of Khan that I love, right? Especially Enterprise Clears Moorings. But First Contact has always been one of my favorites since it came out, right? You
my
too.
number one. Yeah.
But and I fell in love early with the Lower Decks soundtrack.
I will say you were the one that pushed me, because I tend to be a little bit resistant, pushed me to listen to the new show soundtracks.
Yep.
And I tend to be slow to catch up, but keep going. I believe I can't talk. I agree with you. The Lower Deck soundtrack is great.
It's just fun, but leading up, this will be less than subtle, leading up to this episode's interview, I began listening almost daily to the soundtrack to Star Trek Prodigy. Now, the title, the anthem is beautiful, but everything else was composed by a different individual. And so we are thrilled to share with you this episode, an exceptional interview with Nami Melamud, who is the composer of Star Trek Prodigy. And now it seems much more Trek coming out. When Nami was good enough to spend some time with us, a couple things happened, some intentional, some not. One was we went a little long because turns out we're all talkative, and turns out she loves Trek maybe even more than we do, certainly as much.
I would think so, just because her involvement in it.
Well, but you listen to, I mean, she was geeking out about Lower Decks, and that's not even her show. I mean, good on her. But we had said to her in our pre-interview chat, we knew she'd been making the interview circuit. We didn't want to belabor her with the same questions. And so instead, we wanted to talk music with her. So there's a lot of Trek geekery, courtesy of us and especially Nami, but there's also a lot of music geekery, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, I got her talking and this is the part that might, for those that aren't into music, might not, be their thing, but listening to her talk about how she composed her music, and the fact that she has orchestrators that orchestrate it, to me, you're going to hear about all that, but as a former aspiring professional musician and someone now that is still enjoying music, hearing her process, I found extraordinarily fascinating. You're absolutely right. She really knows her track. She talks about how she grew up with it.
Yeah.
We are able to date Jason by her talking about the timelines in which she was watching the shows. So you'll all know how old Jason is.
Well, and then you add about 4 months, and we have you.
6 months.
6 months. No, 8 months.
8 months.
8 months. Yeah.
Because I'm already, the calendar's already flipped for me. You have a little bit of time
right.
left.
I was going to say, that's sad that everybody had to listen to that tortured math this evening. So we try to bring you interviews, everybody, with creatives to help us explore RPGs in real life, etc. And so this interview, a little different, super cool, because we do it with just a really gifted composer who just was the nicest, truly the nicest, most generous person. And we hope to have her back when some of her future work debuts, as we understand, in not so long. So, and I don't know, maybe in the future, we really tried not to ask her anything. We really tried. So with that, we bring you this lovely interview. Nami Melamud is an Israeli-Dutch film composer based in Los Angeles, California. Her scoring credits include over 130 projects in a wide range of genres, most notably the HBO Max comedy An American Pickle, starring Seth Rogen, the Amazon thriller drama series Absentia, starring Santa Katic, and EA's VR video game Medal of Honor Above and Beyond. She also scored the Oscar-winning documentary short Colette and contributed music and arrangements to Amazon's latest hit, Borat's subsequent movie film. Her score to the Star Trek episode Short Trek's Q&A in 2019 landed her the role of composer for Star Trek Prodigy, making her the first female composer for the franchise. All right, well, Nami, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us on Dice and Mind. It's just a pleasure and an honor to have you. We've got a bunch of questions for you, actually just a few big ones, like we were saying before we hit record. So welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I'm excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely.
I like nerding out about Star Trek and about film and about music and about everything. So this will be fun.
So good. So, if it's a few hours in, you'll tell us to stop. Yeah, we're totally there. So, okay. So let me just lead off. I personally, I know, Brad, you've got some questions. I really just have one big one. And so forgive me, because I'm going to start it with an observation to provide a little context. Like we were talking about before, I mean, we both love Star Trek, right? My mom was telling someone, she related this to me. She was telling someone the other day how Star Trek has been central for me since I was little, right? And the fact that in my mid 40s, there's all of this new Trek coming out, I mean, blows the mind, right? During such an awful time in history, what an incredible time in history. To have all of this, kind of a karmic balance. So context here. When
you gotta
I'm picking it up. I know. When I know it's a lot of thoughts going on here. When Lower Decks was announced, I promise I'm gonna get to Prodigy. When Lower Decks was announced, so this is a while ago, I remember thinking, what a stupid idea. I love Star Trek, but I mean, we all remember what happened with the animated series. Right? Who wants or needs a Trek cartoon? Well, I mean, I immediately fell in love with Lower Decks. It's hilarious. I never thought I could like a cartoon that much. Then Prodigy is announced, and it's like it's also a Nickelodeon thing, and it's like, well, I remember Nickelodeon when I was a kid, and that's kind of weird, but I'm on board. Let's hear it, let's see it, etc. And then they started, releasing screenshots and whatnot. And instantly I'm taken with, visually, this is just stunning. I mean, this is unlike Star Trek we've seen. Okay. And of course, as we're recording, we're an episode away from the mid-season wrap for season 1 of Prodigy. And visually, it has been the most stunning of any Star Trek series. I mean, it's incredible, the animation. But what sticks with me is your soundtrack. I listen to a ton of Star Trek music. I always have, and for the past year, it has been all of the shows. It has been my background writing music. And in prep for this conversation this evening, for about 2 weeks, I've been listening to your composing from Prodigy, just kind of on a loop. I mean, I've written a couple chapters thanks to you. And I mean, it's incredible, Nami. And it's cinematic in a way that none of the other shows have been. And I mean, I love them all, right? But I think it's one thing to compose an anthem for a show. That's great. Gives you the feelies and you want to go and save the galaxy. But then to create a soundscape where you're moved emotively, but also it kind of helps you to feel like you're there. I mean, how are you doing? I mean, I'm serious. How it's amazing what you're doing with, and it's for a cartoon, quote unquote. It really blows me away. So my question with all that is how do you get there? I mean, how do you create something like that?
So, okay, this is a big question and a big answer. So first, I have to say that I when I was brought on board, I really didn't know much about, like, I also had the idea of what Nickelodeon does. Like, that's what my nephews watch. So, you know, Bob Sponge, that kind of stuff, that's Nickelodeon.
Yep.
But also it was Star Trek. So I knew that this was going to be the flagship of the new Nickelodeon show. Like, this is going to be the best Nickelodeon show ever, which I think it is. But luckily, I also, like, when I first visited the office, like, and Dan and Kevin showed me around, and I met the team, and I met Ben, and I met the writer's room. So they already had some visuals to share. And I was like, Lord, it was just incredible. It's like, you know, now they're sharing some of these early shots and the backgrounds on Twitter. Like, you could see that. And I saw that, and I was just like, okay, this is already inspiring. This is already making you want to write, like, you know, this big cinematic music. And the thing is about those visuals that it really captures, like, the vastness of space, I feel, which, you know, again, I love the other shows as well, just like you're saying. But oftentimes with especially with the live action stuff, you don't get the colorfulness of space. You don't get the richness and the size of it. It's just not something that has been captured yet in Star Trek. And when I saw that they're doing that, I'm like, okay, we're going for it. We're going big. And then also I had, you know, I had read the scripts pretty early on. So I knew where the story is heading. And so it was also about, like, you know, I'm coming from a point of view that I already know what's the continuation of those characters, like, where are they growing? Like, you know, we also how Dal grew, we also how Rock is growing. And this continues on, and you know, I know what's the story of that diviner. So, you know, I was kind of working backwards. So knowing that information at the top, where the story goes, is actually super helpful in establishing, okay, what color of music, what instrumentation is it going to be, what style, what tone, and even that it is the villain per se. Maybe his music will have something a little more than just like the evil Darth Vader kind of thing, you know, like, you know, it's not that, like, there's more to that. There's a background story, there's something else to that theme, which you know, you will find out. So, and then there was also, you know, the filmmakers, Dan and Kevin, they're very good with music. And so when they were writing, you know, when they came up with the concept, and while they're writing, they were also listening to music that inspired them. And so they shared the Spotify list with me. Or was it
interesting?
So yeah, they shared what influenced them with writing, and you know, there was some James Horner, there was some Michael Giacchino, there was some Hans Zimmer. So, but it was mainly like those big scores. And I'm like, okay, I'm getting the drift of it. We're doing a show that is big, that is like, we're treating this like a movie, and this is like you know, it's not a little cartoon for kids. This is, you know, yes, it is also for kids. That's our target audience. But, you know, we want to bring new lovers of track, so that in 40 years from now, we'll still have track. Like, I think that's the idea behind it. But it's also for adults and for the parents who are not necessarily trackies, but to fall in love with that character and the characters, and welcome them to track. And you know, after this, hopefully they watch Voyager, and from there they'll watch TNG and DS9 and like Discovery and Picard and Strange New Worlds, the original series, and Enterprise. And maybe the animated series just for like, oh, and Lower Decks. Oh my God, I have to tell you, I love Lower Decks. I can't wait for the next season. I know. I love the score too. But Lower Decks, oh my God, I want to marry Mariner. She's my, oh my God,
so good.
He's like, if I had taken the Kobayashi Maru, like, she would be like, I'll choose Mariner, like, all anyway. So yeah, so that's so that's so that's the inspiration for that process of writing. And then I actually came up with like themes and motifs for every character, except for Murph, actually, because we'll see what happens with Murph. It might be too early on for the pilot, because we didn't really, you know, this was a little early for Murph. But even the ship, like, you know, the Protostar has its theme, and So every character was like, okay, so what would be the personality or the musical identification of that character or that relationship? And so I played it to the filmmakers, and they digged it. We had quite a lot of revisions on the pilot, like, back and forth of like, okay, do you guys know what a spotting session, or should I explain? Or
I don't. Brad might.
I do, but go ahead, just because it's fascinating.
So basically, when you work on animation, you start with music pretty early on. Actually, once you have an animatic, so that would be like a black and white, sometimes with a little bit of color, so that can identify the characters, but it's not exactly super. Sometimes you can't really tell what's happening in the picture. They have music, which is temporary track that you're using music from other films and other shows to sort of help guide where this is going emotionally. Or if there's an action, because imagine this is like moving papers. It doesn't look very good. And there's the vocals of the actors, like the voices are already recorded at that point. Okay. Most of them, like sometimes you'd have like, say Janeway is talking, and then all of a sudden there's a missing line. And so the assistant editor would fill up that line. It'd be some voice of a man. Or, it happens the other way around. It's so funny. And then you do a spotting session, and where me and the showrunners and Ben, the director, we discuss what should be the music in each scene of the show, and what it represents and what we want to emphasize, and kind of moments where we really want to capture. Usually we want to capture everything because everything is important, and you have to tell the story so quickly. It's just 22 minutes, and you have to put so much. Things are sometimes you have very quick musical transitions, and to me that was a challenge, because how do you do that smoothly with the feel of a cinematic score with all the colors and like, but make it not making Mickey Mousey, like, so it's not feeling like an old cartoon.
Right.
So that was challenging. It's still challenging.
So when you were going through this process, is there enough artwork already available where you can see the color patina of the illustrations? Okay. Good.
That was the big help for me, and I looked at it so many times. Is that there's some sort of a lookbook, and they do that with other shows too. It's not just Star Trek. Like not always they'll share it with you, but like if it's usually with animation they will, because it does help to inspire and give you the idea of what they're going for tonally, because you want to match your tonal tone to what they're doing. And so so there was I saw like backgrounds for the planets that they're going to, and like what the protostar looks like, and what that what Tars Lamora looks like, and what the characters would look like, and what the uniforms would look like, and what the phaser would look like, so, and sometimes it'd be so detailed when you're like, oh my God, I really want the toys now. So I'm waiting for those
I could put a protostar on my desk. I'd be okay with that.
That is a gorgeous ship. Oh my God.
So it does really help to know where it's going tonally, because and then when you get the final animation, oftentimes it would be mainly adjustments, and sometimes like a little bit of rewriting, if a scene really changed, or act break is happening. Like this, we don't have act breaks on Paramount, but they are going to be on Nickelodeon, so we're doing that. And so sometimes the music would should have continued through the next directly into the next scene, but we have to sort of play an act out with the music, so something a little more dramatic to carry into the black and into the commercial or whatever. So, and then we recorded with the orchestra. I mean, that's the track. And then we mix it, which is a whole other, it's a process that most people are not aware of. But like, once you record the orchestra, you usually have takes, right? The musicians read it the first time, then they read it the second time and the third time. And sometimes you make changes with the orchestration, or, you want to try something else, or you thought this would sound a different way, or whatever. You're like, oh, maybe the clarinet will play this with the bassoon. So you make those changes, and sometimes you'll be like, okay, we'll record from bar 70 to bar 80, and just that part.
Yeah.
That's the part that, there was noise in the studio, so we need to fix it. And then somebody edits it, so that's called a score editor. And then it goes to a mix, and then we do some revisions on a mix sometimes, and then it goes to the final dub scenario, like a dub date, so dub stage. So it's a whole process, and then it comes out to Spotify. And you listen to it and you write.
Yeah. How much more difficult is this right now because of the pandemic?
I was going to ask that. Yeah. Because isn't the orchestra overseas that's doing the recording for it, if I read correctly?
So here's the funny part. The pandemic did not affect our process.
Really?
Yeah, it's here's why. Meetings like the spotting sessions can definitely be done on Zoom, which have been done on Zoom. I mean, obviously it's more fun to be in the room together and joke around together and be in person. But it in terms of effectiveness of work, it doesn't matter, because actually you can share your screen and we can look at the picture together and make suggestions and make that's a non-issue. And then with recording sessions, to be honest, this was very much happening way before the pandemic. So it's very budget dependent. Like if you could record in a studio in LA or in Abbey Road in London, or in Seattle or Nashville, Prague or Moscow, or like there's so many budget considerations. And then oftentimes American shows will record in Europe, like that has been happening for a long time.
Right.
And so not every time you can afford to fly. And so the studios have set that up like a long time ago, that like you could do a remote session. So there are plugins that are very they're very, the stream is way better than Zoom. You can really feel like you're in the studio and it's live, and everything that that sounds in your house or your studio and or wherever you are will be
incredible,
directly sounding in the studios. Actually, we had a little bit of an incident because my mic was on and my cat was the entire orchestra was hearing that, and they all started laughing, and I can hear it because I was with headphones. I'm like, what's going on? And he was like behind me meowing. So it was great. So it's what I'm saying is it's kind of easy. The only minor part of recording of working far like remotely is the dub stage, actually, because when you're doing the dub online, it's like, okay, so the dub part is where they balance the audio, all the audio in the show. So it would be like the dialogue, the sound effects, and the score. And so that is literally the best moment it will be ever heard, because it's they're doing it in a room that feels like a theater,
right?
And this is going for TV or for streaming, so it's not going to be in a cinema. Like you're not going to go to the theater to see it. So normally when you go to the dub for TV shows, that's the best sounding moment for the show. Like that is the part to sit back and be like, oh, we did something so great. And then, when you do it on a computer, it does take away from that, that moment. So for me, I'm kind of bummed that, we don't get to do that. But I'm working on another show, which is recording like in the room behind where they do the dub for Prodigy in Warner Brothers. So I did get to see it. Like, there was one time I was like, I went there and they were just dubbing, one of the episodes, and I got to see it on the big screen. I was so happy about it.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Do you coordinate or communicate with the studio, with like the studio director as you're listening? Do you do they ask questions? How there's interaction there while you're listening, right?
What, listening to the orchestra perform?
Yeah, while they're performing, they might stop and ask you a question, or okay, I just was curious if there's interaction during that period.
Yeah, normally that's a part where the score has already been approved. So at this point we've done like several rounds or like, maybe one round if I was lucky. But normally at that point where when we go into the orchestra, it's already at the animation phase. So this is long after I first wrote it. And then it's already mainly approved. I don't think the showrunners, actually also the writers, like they're often invited to listen and to be, because it's a Zoom, so we can do it, which is actually a big plus in pandemic times, because now a lot of people can access, like can come to see the recording, like
That's
when
cool.
you record stuff at Warner Brothers, there's a limit to how many people you can invite. So this is actually pretty cool, that people can listen remotely, and the people who wrote the episode, they can listen, the writers. So sometimes they would have like comments, but it's I don't think we ever changed like the music on this for story. It was mainly for performance, because I'm like, okay, well, the horns are not strong enough on this, we should have the trumpets as well. So it was more about like the musical performance rather than the story, because all the story points are already there.
Normally, I would suspect it's probably the horns are too strong and you need more.
Normally it's
Brad might be a little biased on this.
Yeah, I'm a little biased as a horn player. So
I love horns. Oh my God, that's the best. It's the best.
I always love to hear a composer say that.
Yeah.
So, and that is, and I actually when I listen, Jason knows this, because I love music. I'll listen into the music. I don't know if this makes sense, to kind of hear the individual parts, the individual instruments and so on. And it's fascinating, especially with your music with Prodigy, how it meshes, and how it's still many instruments, but it just feels like so much more like one tone. So
that's the idea.
Yeah.
I mean, you always want to create like, whatever show it is that you're working on, you want to have it to have its own personality, its own signature. Like you don't want it to sound like someone else. You want it to sound like Prodigy, So, we're not trying to do Voyager. We're not trying to do Lower Decks, even though I love that score, but I'm not trying to do it. I'm trying to do Prodigy, which, has been an ongoing effort.
So on that, okay, no pun intended. I was going to say on that note, but I can't do that in this conversation. But
you just did.
I know. I don't know how else to say it. But on that note, I'm wondering, Nami, is
you just did it again.
Go away. So
get off my bridge.
Yeah, really. Oh, I'm going to use that one. You heard it here first. So when you look at this first season of composing for Prodigy, I'm really curious. Do you, as the composer, do you have a favorite leitmotif or scene or even set of bars that for you just really stand out?
Yes, there's two of them. So there's the zero motif, which I just love. I love. It's a piccolo thing. I just like, I don't know, it lends itself to a lot of stuff, like a lot of variations, a lot of like a range of emotions. Like, I mean, it's just a personal favorite. Like those notes are for me, but also the protostar, the protostar theme. And then it goes to like that that when the protostar first lights up. I remember that, like so that to me, like I guess so. It's I like both of these the best probably. But I love everything, so it's really fun to do Jankum stuff too with the trombones. kind of a jazzy little nod.
He's such a strange character, and my favorite line so far in the entire series was that last one of, I thought that was a physical manifestation of Jacob Pog's like feelings. I'm like, oh my God, that's so intelligent, and this is for kids. That's and then it's so good. I will say the scene, I don't remember which episode this was, the scene where they are in, I'm going to call it a cave with the Samari crystals. when
it was a cave, I think.
It wasn't it. Yeah, it was all shifty. When what you did with the musical environment, I was watching with my 14-year-old, and she was paying attention to the show, unfortunately not to me, and I swear I almost shed a tear. It was just like the whole scene just changed because of the oral environment. And it was that all you were talking about earlier, of trying to make this grand in this whole scheme of space. And then you're in this cave and you see these little crystals, and it's, it's silly because they're learning, of course, they've got their morality play going on. And then your music just kind of subtly changes and kicks in. It's like, I think that was the point truly at which I went from, I'm enjoying this show to I'm hooked and I'm going to stay with Prodigy. That did it for me. Really. No, I mean, it's just what you're doing is incredible with that show. Well, it was gorgeous.
I have to comment about that though, because that was the episode. That was the episode I was dreading. Because
really?
I read in the script, I'm like, oh my god, how are we gonna do this? Okay, this is gonna be interesting. I mean, it presented a cool opportunity, so I'm excited about it. But at the same time, like, oh my god, heavy lifting on music and sound. I was like, I hope the sound designers are aware of their job here, which I think they did a wonderful job.
Yeah.
But for me, I was like, okay, this is a moment where I have to go like super far from everything that we've been doing. Like this is an alien world. And the thing is, like, I'm already writing a music for a bunch of aliens, so it's like they're all aliens. but this is like completely, they're not really communicating with the we can't understand them. So there was a lot of back and forth on that section. I think we did like 5 versions of like, until we figured out like the right tone. And that's where I'm like, I have to, to give the credit for Dan and Ben and Kevin, because they are like, they really pushed me out of my comfort zone as an orchestral composer. They're like, Nami, you got this, you can do it. Let's push, let's go into, this territory of like, let's achieve something that was, this is a strange new world. So support it. And then we actually went for like, the idea behind it was like, it's going to be so dissonant and weird and like shapey, like those shapes that are in the sand, but they could be reflected with the music. So I did this like stuff, these arpeggios with the woodwinds. But the thing was like that, when the Sumari, when they sing, so that's going to be very, all of a sudden you have this like choir and you have this like tonality that it feels like a perfect song. But that's just because what we heard before was a complete opposite of that. So that emphasizes that, the gap of like, okay, this is their gift, their musical gift. So it was really fun. It was fun to do. And ultimately it became my favorite episode. So write for to music. So but it was a challenge.
Obviously it sounds like you've had a phenomenal experience doing this. What has been your experience, here in the States, obviously being a composer, but also being a woman? Have you encountered challenges with that? I know as someone who used to play regularly, nowhere near the way or at a level that would sit in an orchestra and play this, but you just didn't see a lot of female composers when you did, if you were doing contemporary orchestral work.
And we know there's still a lot of misogyny.
Yeah. No, I will say that it's very much still a boys' club. I was just in a meeting for another show I'm working on, and yes, I was the only lady there, and there were like 9 guys. So yes, it's still very much that world. I think actually coming from a place, I'm originally from Israel, so I think I just wasn't aware of all of this when I grew up there. And in Israel, everyone goes to everyone has to serve the military for so girls have to do that too. Like there's some sort of inequality that like I haven't quite seen in this industry yet. But coming with that, like, hey, there's nothing a girl can't do, coming with that perception that was in my mind, here. I was already in a mindset that I'm gonna do it no matter what, like I don't care. And then coming here, I was like, wait, wait, there's really no female composers that, you know, I knew Rachel Portman and I knew Anne Dudley and Shirley Walker, but that was it. And yes, in comparison to like the men composers,
right,
there's a lot. And sometimes I'm like, I wish that we would just call them male composers, because everyone's like, oh, female composer. Like, what? Why do we call them male composer?
That's right.
I mean, this is kind of ridiculous. So ideally, there should not be a female and male composer. Should just be a composer. But until we get there to that point, I think there should be like, you know, we're trying to push for equal opportunity. But it's hard. Like, you know, if oftentimes I get invited to a meeting and, you know, I'm interviewed for this whatever film.
Yep.
And there's an Oscar winning composer who has 20 more years of experience.
Yeah.
And so who are they going to hire? Like, are they going to hire the newcomer?
Yeah.
You know, and I don't want to get hired just because I'm a woman. I want to get hired for my talents, which I think is what happened with all the stuff I've been working on, to be honest. Like when I got my first TV show, it was just because I was the right person. They did not care if it was a male or female. They just needed someone to start on a Monday to figure it out. I swear, that's what it was with Absentia on Amazon. They were like, you know, they needed someone to start right away, and a person whose reel was matching what they were what they're looking for. And it's the same with Star Trek. Like I started on, you know, I got the Q&A episode and I think I did a good job because they hired me on. Right. So it was not like, hey, you know, it was by accident that it was, you know, me being the first female composer, although Diane Warren did write the theme for Enterprise, which people tend to forget.
Interesting.
Yeah, people
forget. I didn't know that.
She didn't write the score, she just wrote the theme.
Okay.
Yeah,
I know Rachel Portman from Cider House Rules and Legend of Bagger Vance, you know, another great composer.
Yeah, so, Chocolate. I think she won the Oscar for Chocolate, no? Or maybe she nominated. Yeah.
Wow. So I'm just fascinated, just because, like you said, you know, I played in a section with musicians that was it was egalitarian. It was very mixed. Horn seems to be that way, whereas other instruments tend to be a little different. I have a daughter that played trumpet, you know, and
that's so cool.
You know, it's hard, you know, as well as, you know, trumpet traditionally has been a male instrument. You know, my son plays clarinet, and clarinet was traditionally a female instrument.
Yeah, no, actually, there are a lot of male clarinet players who played on my scores, and there were female horn players, and you know, I think the only instrument where I haven't seen much diversity was trombones, and a harp. But
interesting.
I don't know. I don't know any female trombone player. Don't know any of those.
I've never seen a man play a harp.
Yeah.
Isn't that
I've seen a lot of men play flute, for example. Like the principal of the Israeli Philharmonic, he's incredible. Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. It's interesting with the harp and the trombone. So,
do you love it when you can get in front of an orchestra and conduct still, even with all your composing?
Yes and no. I'm intimidated by it because I'm not like a professional conductor, but I do enjoy it. Like after I get over myself, you know, of that initial fear of like, okay, there's like a bunch of really great players and you know, they're all sitting there and I'm supposed to wave my hands and make it work. So yeah, I studied a little bit of conducting. It's just that like I'm focusing on composing. So I think it's a lack of practice and a lack of like confidence, I guess, which comes with time and experience. So you have to like, that's why when I have the opportunity, I do try to conduct at least a few cues to, you know, to learn a little bit better. But I do like to be able to be in the booth, because when you're recording, you know, when you're in the room with the orchestra, oftentimes you'll hear them not in the balance that, you know, ultimately they would be in your final mix.
Right.
So, and then you'll be busy with other stuff too. Like you might miss some dynamics or things that you want to change, as opposed to if you listened, you know, in the booth with your engineer and let someone else conduct, you will hear those little things and you could fix them on spot, and it will save you time and energy and tears later on. So I'm just a perfectionist. That's a problem. You know, the enemy of the good is perfect. So
right. I'm curious how many, maybe the answer is one, how many major projects can you work on at a time?
Well, I have no life, so I'm currently working on 2 very big projects.
Yeah.
So yeah, but that comes with a price. That comes with the price of like, giving up on like some birthday parties or like, coming for a little bit and leaving early.
Yeah.
Or, there's like personal sacrifices that people don't talk a lot about in Hollywood, actually. Like we're like, oh yeah, the Hollywood thing, it's fun. Yeah, it is fun. I will say that. Like it comes with a lot of perks. But there is a price for sure. Like, you will sometimes do a revision until 3 a.m. because, you have to do it, or you'll wake up early and do it. But ultimately you need to, to make sure that everyone's happy with the production and that you're happy too, which is really important too. Like I want to stand behind every note that I write. And to do that, it takes energy and time and practice. So, yeah, for sure. It's not so easy, but yeah, so I'll say 2, but I don't have an assistant or anything. So it's also about that. Like, I mean, if I hired someone, then I'll probably be able to do a little more.
Okay.
Can I ask a nerdy question? This is Jason told me to behave because I'm a music nerd. So he actually, so you can see, he told me. So when you're composing, this is more of a technical question. Are you writing or are you working off of like notation software? How are you? How do you actually, what works well for you from a composition perspective?
Well, I'm a keyboard player originally. Like I started with piano, and then I moved to oboe and flute and guitar. So but my initial instrument is piano. So I'm thinking in melody and chords. Really, that's my thought process. Now, when you work on a film or a TV show, you usually work with a software that enables you to see the picture and to sync it with your bars and your beats, and you have all these like tracks that would represent the orchestra in a computer language called MIDI. So you have this keyboard of MIDI. So it's like, it looks like a piano, but it's not really a piano. It's an electric thing. And it translates whatever you record, or if you write, then you can also notate it or write it with like, what I call like cubes, little cubes, if they represent time. So it does look like music, but when you look at it, it's not always looking like music. So sorry, I'm not explaining very well.
You are. It's actually it's fascinating.
But yeah, so basically you have all sorts of like third-party plugins. So they would be called sample libraries. So you can have the sound of a flute and a sound of a guitar and a sound of a viola and a sound of a horn. And in those libraries, it goes very far. Like you can invest thousands of dollars in this, because some libraries were recorded in Vienna and some were recorded in Australia and Berlin, and like all these competing ensembles and competing companies that are making this, and they record every articulation and every every dynamic. So you want to play your violin, so is going to be like the short notes. So it'll be staccato, staccatissimo, like spiccato. There's so many techniques. And it could be like piano. So like, low volume, and it could be forte. That's like strong volume, could be fortissimo, which is like the strongest volume. So, or pizzicato when they're plucking their strings. So, there's all sorts of libraries, and then there are all gazillion million instruments. And that's only, that's the chamber instruments. You can also have like synths. So this goes very far, and you can have audio plugins. Like there's so much you can do with that software. I work with Cubase. There are other softwares like Logic and Digital Performer, and some people use Ableton, which is interesting. Pro Tools, and after you finish, you export that MIDI, which is actually notes, but it doesn't look really good. As musicians cannot read those notes. Like it lacks all the articulations. It lacks performance requests. It lacks a lot. It doesn't look good. So then you move it to a notation software like Sibelius or Finale, and you edit it. And that's actually the job of the orchestrator usually. And the orchestrator will also translate my writing into the ensemble that we have, because sometimes I'll be like, okay, this is what the violins are doing, this is what the, or this is what the horns are doing, but I accidentally wrote 4 horns and we only have 3, or stuff like that. So that would need some sort of, or I wrote for two flutes, and actually on Prodigy we do have 2 flutes, but like if I wrote for 2 clarinets and we don't have 2 clarinets, so he often will move something to the bassoon, so that kind of stuff. Or if I didn't have time and I was like having to rush things, and I was like, okay, I'm just going to use an ensemble patch for this line. I don't do that a lot, but like if I do, then he'll be like, okay, well, this should be the high woodwind. So it would be piccolo, flute, oboe, bam, done, but somebody has to be very smart about that. And so I'm very lucky that I work with Jeff Kricka mostly for Prodigy. But lately we also had Ian Gottlieb and Tracy Turnbull. Hope I'm saying it correctly. But this team, and Jennifer Derricks, this team has been very, very great with that. Like, you really have to have people that you trust with orchestrating, because they are translating what you do to the real life. So that's I'm very grateful for. It's important to have a team.
Yeah, and then does that necessarily circle back to you for proofing?
Yes, it does. I mean, when there's time, it does. Because think about it, when we do this, it still has to go to copying, which is to printing and taping and going to the stage. So when we don't do it last minute, then yes, it goes to proofing. And what kind of when I hear it, and then we make changes.
Yeah. What kind of rehearsal time does the orchestra get?
0.
Wow.
Yeah, there's no.
That's incredible.
That's their professionality of
they're that good.
Musician. That's what they do. That's their perfectionism. Like, they read something. Usually it's a read. It's a read. It's not perfect. There will be mistakes. There will be people who enter late, or if it's a difficult cue, it will take a moment. But by the 3rd or 4th read, they're like, it's done. It's done, and it's performed also the way that that's the beauty of it. Like, if I had to sit there, I don't know how I would do it. I'm amazed by how good they are in sight reading.
Blows my mind.
This is
God.
Yeah, it does help when the same orchestra performs, on a show, for example. Like, they already heard the 0 theme, they already know, they already have a sense of what I'm going for. So it is better to come back to the same ensemble. That's for sure.
They're learning you as a composer along the way.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. And I'm learning them. Yeah, that's the same thing. Like, I'm like, okay, well, they're capable of this and this,
No, that's fascinating. Yeah. That you might revise or recommend adjustments just based off of.
Yeah. Sometimes, this has happened before, but I'm like, okay, well, I don't know if this is going to come out well based on like previous experiments that I had with them. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to add like a cue. So a cue is when you, for example, I'm like, okay, well, we'll have this for the first trumpet, and I'm going to cue the 2nd and the 3rd trumpet. So it's going to be written in their notes, but it's going to have this line that says cue. And if we're going to tell them play with cues, that means that everyone's going to play that line. And if we're going to say no cues, then just the first trumpet will play that line. And so that's an easy way to make changes very fast. Be like, okay, I know that this line might need more help. Or maybe I'm going to want just the one. So instead of like, spending studio time, which is very expensive, instead of being like, okay, can everyone please, play C on the first beat and then E on the 3rd beat, instead of explaining to them, which takes time, it would be faster to have these cues. Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Thank you so much for spending this time with us. You've been so gracious, and we really appreciate just the beautiful music. I mean, it's just every time we watch Prodigy, it's just such an immersive experience. Honestly, more because of the auditory environment even than the visual environment. And on that show, it's just what a lovely mesh.
Yeah, I'm glad you're enjoying it.
We really are. Thank you, and best wishes for all the future projects, especially the ones you can't tell us about. We have to assume that, like with Trek, the NDA, it must, like, punishable by death, be a foot through. Oh my God. But yeah, we're really looking forward to hearing. We're looking forward to hearing the score from episode 10, and then of course the second half of the season.
Yeah,
and when your other projects come out, maybe you'll come back if it's all right. And join us again.
Yeah,
we can plan on that for sure.
Awesome, Nami. Thank you so much. Be well.
Thank you.
Well, hopefully that was as cool for you to listen to as it was for us to record.
Yeah, because it was.
She is so approachable, and just very giving of her time. She loves talking about Trek and music. I have to congratulate us on the fact that we were able to get through the whole interview without trying to pry any secrets or material that she is under NDA for.
I'm going to congratulate you.
Yeah. So
well done, sir. Yeah.
Well, I think you were pretty good at holding back. Although the funny thing is, I shouldn't say this on recording, but I will. Traditionally, the joke has been when we have these interviewees, I'm always the one that just is a little overboard. This time around, it was pretty equal, but I could tell just based off of your facial expressions.
I know. I was
that you were bought into this whole idea of this, because this was a big one. You and I have talked about Trek music for so long, and now we get to talk to someone and writing Trek music.
I mean, just who's writing Trek music, which truly blows my mind. Nami, if you listen to this, thank you again from both of us, seriously, because it was just so much fun. And what you all, our lovely audience, didn't hear is the chat we had before, and then trying to be respectful of Nami's time. We wrapped, and then we all kept talking. And it got even more interesting. So no, you're right. I geeked out a bit on this one.
Yeah, she's been very good. Obviously, if you've listened you got some idea of all the work and everything that goes into writing and taking what she does and putting it on to film or television.
Fascinating.
2, obviously she's made it clear she's working on material that she's not going to talk about, which is fine. Yeah. But we know this is not the last we're going to hear from her. Far from it.
No, we know that, right?
3, I think it's important. We talked about it in the interview, and I'm going to bring it up here again, is that there is a severe deficit in terms of professional composers that are women. And the funny thing that came out of this, I was thinking about this even during the interview, was that, why don't we call them male composers if I'm a female? This is not what she said, but if she's a female composer, why are they not male?
She's
composers?
Absolutely right.
She is. She mentioned Rachel Portman, who is I'm a huge fan of her.
You said that.
Her work. And she knows Rachel Portman, which made me giddy.
Yeah, that got you.
Yeah, but I'll let you wrap this up. But honestly, this one was absolutely fascinating to me, to talk to someone so creative. We listen to it every week. Listening to her talk about how she finds themes, and she works with the writers and the producers to get the musical themes for these characters and situations, and then how she meshes them into the plot and into the story.
I gotta say, when I shared with you both that the Crystal Cave scene with the Samari was really what just took me. I just, for whatever reasons, found that truly moving. And then she just went off on that with the creative process. It's for a wannabe like me behind the piano, right, to listen to her. I mean, you blow me away regularly with your depth of knowledge with music, and then to listen to someone like Nami, where it's like, and these are the 42 steps between meeting with the directing crew and writing crew, and then actually getting this music to the screen. It's just, I mean, it's phenomenal.
Yeah. And of course, I much like, like any of our guests, we would like to see them back, including Nami. Please come back, as you've completed subsequent work that you're working on that Jason tried to get you to talk about.
Oh, please.
she was very, I think we were very good at not pushing that. She was very good at staying within her boundaries of what she's able to talk about. But she teased just enough, not saying what it is, but just that she has projects. You talked about the number of projects that you and I have talked online.
You and I have been talking for days.
Yeah, we've been trying to guess and just mark it down so that we can once her work comes out, we can
just to confirm for ourselves. After we ended the interview, we started talking about the nature of NDAs, which and I didn't say anything at the time. I've only ever had to sign one NDA for this little bit of consulting work I did, and mine, I mean, it was a lot of boilerplate, but it's like, okay, and sign. And I can't in talking to and working with some publishers and editors who around the Star Trek project my friend and I are working on, the constant thing with a franchise like Trek that we've heard is they are hardcore, which
they're like, if you're a tech person, they're like the old Apple used to be,
right?
Steve.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
If you did not know what was coming out until the day it came out. And if you did, Steve was coming after you.
Right. This isn't Spider-Man. You have to keep your secrets.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. So Paramount, and obviously because of the rebirth of Trek, they are keeping things really close to their vest. Didn't we just hear, we know that Strange New Worlds is coming out, as we record this.
Not long as this drops.
Yeah. As this drops, we've already found out in the past that they're working on a Starfleet Academy show. I saw.
Yep.
So
Section 31 will be forever in development.
Yep. Michelle Yeoh hopefully someday will be again on TV. I love her as an actress. That was Georgia.
Oh, okay. I have to to close this. I'll just, speaking of acting, and I think I had messaged the group earlier today, but I kid you not, for the sake of research, this week I've had to watch some DS9. Now, you've been watching DS9 for a while, but I've had to watch some DS9 for research purposes, for writing purposes. I'm being serious. It's a hard life. I forgot how truly gifted of an actor is Avery Brooks.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's been a while since I had really just sat down to watch DS9. And I've been watching kind of mid and later seasons and just a few episodes, but it brings me right back to the late 90s, right mid to late 90s when we were watching this. And oh my God, so strong.
That's why I've loved all the captains.
Yeah.
Picard, Janeway, Kirk.
Yep.
Well, even the little we've seen of Pike, and we'll see more of Pike.
You can expect an episode on that.
Yes. Oh, yeah. But for me, there is something about Avery Brooks and how gifted he is in that role. And, I followed him when I was a young kid. When we were very young, there was a show, Spencer for Hire, on. Yep. And he was
Hawk.
He was Hawk.
Yeah.
And
then he got a spinoff.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then the ironic thing is when he started the show, they didn't want him to look like Hawk because they wanted him to have a different look. And you could, if you go into that,
let's just deconstruct that for a moment before he's speaking of, just like Nami's comments, that look, it's difficult, right? 2.5% of top composers, recognized composers are women, right? We know now from her that the music industry in terms of composing in Hollywood is, and elsewhere, is akin to many other industries, creative, industrial, technological, educational, whatever, where representation continues to be a challenge. And it's not a secret, it's well documented that Avery Brooks's, so Commander Sisko's look, those first couple seasons, was very intentional to I mean, at the risk of being crass, to really kind of whitewash the character to make it more palatable to what they thought the audience would be. He pushed against that. Very well documented.
Yeah, they did not want him to be as powerful a presence. He was a presence anyway.
There was fear about him being a powerful Black man in a leading role. And I mean, oh my God, look what he did with that role. Yeah. Look what he did with the character.
We could, that's a whole, we gotta go with the DS9 thing, but see, this is what happens when we start talking Trek, and we are not a Trek podcast. We are a podcast that talks about Trek.
Right. So for example, if you happen to be part of Edge Studios, we would love to talk to you.
Yes,
we're all about Star Wars too, or anything else you want to talk about.
We're with Boba Fett being released and everything like that, we really would like to talk to you and find out when you're going to be creating a Grogu NPC. And so
I just want to watch Ahsoka. I'm waiting for that show. Okay, we gotta stop. As always, thanks everyone for being here. Like Brad said, we hope and trust you got as much out of our interview with Nami Melamud as we did. What a wonderful time. What a fascinating and creative individual. Be well, stay well. We will see you next week for a temporary 1 episode change of pace and a refresh. Bye-bye.